Everyone, welcome to Make Do Tell Story Session 9. And today's story is found in this book here, The Lion's Whisker, title story. It's also found in Pleasant, Spain's 33 Multicultural Tales to Tell, another fabulous book for those of you who are learning to tell your own stories. It is a bunch of fairly short stories that you can learn to tell, and you have permission to learn to tell them and to tell them. So that's a fabulous thing. All right, so The Lion's Whisker. This story is from Ethiopia. Once, long ago, there lived a young woman, and she lived in one village, and she ended up marrying a man from another village. Now, this man had lost his wife some months before. He had a young son, and he needed someone to come and help with his young son and to help around the house. He was a traveling man. He took wares from village to village, and so he was not often home. The young woman began her life in this new village, and it wasn't long before she grew to love her son, her new son, very, very much. But her new son did not consider her his mother. He missed his mother so much, and he did not take well to her. She, on the other hand, she would do all kinds of loving things for him. She would mend his clothes, and she would cook for him, and she would save him the best pieces of meat and make the most wonderful soups ever, but he would have nothing to do with her. She just wanted to hug him all the time, and she tried once to kiss him on the forehead, and he wouldn't have it. "You are not my mother," he said to her. And this hurt her heart very much. Finally, one day, she decided to go to the village wise man. And she did so. She asked him for a love potion so that her stepson would grow to love her as she loved him. The wise man looked upon her, and he paused for a moment. And he said, "I will make you your love potion. But first, you must bring me 3 ingredients essential for the potion. The whiskers, 3 whiskers from a ferocious lion." Well, she didn't know about that. He told her where she could find one. So she went home and she went to bed that night and tossed and turned. She just couldn't sleep. But finally she resolved that she would do it because she wanted her stepson to love her so much. And so the next day she took a big chunk of meat and she wrapped it in some paper and put it in her pack, and she set off for the very spot that the village wise man had told her she would find the lion. And when she was some distance off, she looked up and she could see that lion up there on a rock, standing. It growled, and it frightened her very much. And so she just threw that chunk of meat that she had pulled from her pack, and it landed some feet away, and she took off running back. And when she had gotten some distance away, she turned to look, and there she saw that lion padding toward that chunk of meat, staring at her. But when it got to the chunk of meat, it stopped, and it ate it right up. The next day, she got up again, and she packed another big chunk of meat and placed it in her pack. And she took off. She began her trek to the spot where she knew she would find the lion. And sure enough, from that distance, she could see him, but she got a little bit closer this time. And again, she pulled that chunk of meat from her pack and she threw it. And she ran again. Her heart was pounding. But this time she didn't run near as far, and she turned around and she looked and saw the lion padding toward the meat, looking at her as it did so, and then its head was down and it was devouring the meat. Again, the next day she rose, she packed the meat, she placed it in her pack, and she began her trek to where she would find the lion, and this time she got a little bit closer. And she could see the lion standing on its rock, staring at her. And this time, she laid that chunk of meat that she had taken from her pack there on the path, and she backed away, her eyes on the lion the whole time. And she watched as that lion padded his way toward the chunk of meat. And then she turned and she went back down the path, her heart beating, but not nearly as ferociously as it had done in those 3 days before. The next morning she got up again. She packed a piece of meat and placed it in her pack, the pack on her back, and she began her trek. And this time she saw the lion as she had done all the times before, but she got a little closer. And she laid the piece of meat in the path. And she backed away, but not that far this time, some yards off. And she stopped and she watched as the lion began to pad its way toward the meat. And she stood and she watched as it devoured that meat. It looked up when it was done, looked into her eyes, and then turned and padded away. She turned and headed back to her home. The next morning she got up again. She packed a little piece of meat, as she had done before. She placed it in her pack and the pack on her back and began her trek. And this time she got much closer as she watched that lion up there on its rock. And she laid the meat down. And again she watched as the lion padded toward her, this time standing very near. And when it had devoured the meat, she turned again and returned to her home. The next morning, she got up again, she packed a little piece of meat, she placed it in the pack on her back, and she began her trek toward the spot where she knew she would see the lion. And this time she walked right up to that rock. She placed the chunk of meat there at the feet of the lion. The lion bent its head forward and began to eat that piece of meat. And as it did so, she took a little knife from her pack and she cut off 3 whiskers and placed them back in the pack on her back, and she turned and she left the lion to eat its meal. Straight away, she went to the house of the wise man of the village, and she presented her 3 whiskers. I have them for you. Now you will make my potion, my love potion, that my stepson might love me as I love him. And the wise man took the 3 whiskers, and he looked at them, and he said, my dear, you have no need of a love potion. You have the courage that you need to face your stepson, no matter how he faces you. You have the courage to stand and to move toward him slowly and patiently, for you have learned this from your trek to the lion every day. Give him time. and he will grow to love you as you love him. And that is the story of the lion's whiskers. So, as we've talked before, you can find multiple sources and they will be slightly different each time. And that's the beauty of it. And then when you create yours, you can create it from within yourself. You will feel your way into the story. But there's another method that you can also use to enhance your learning and to help speed the process up a little bit and to truly make it your own. And it's called bonesing the story. So making a story bones. And all that really is, it's maybe you've done it in school. It's much like an outline where you go through and you note the important pieces of the story. So for this one, it might be that you would write down, young woman marries. Stepson doesn't like her. She loves him anyway. She is distressed. She goes to the village wise man. He tells her to get the 3 whiskers from the lion. She's scared, but she's determined. And she takes a chunk of meat each morning to feed the lion. And she gets closer each time as she goes, until finally she lays the meat at the lion's feet, and while it eats, she cuts 3 whiskers. She returns back to the wise man. The wise man tells her she has learned what she needs to know to allow her stepson to come to love her. And that's it. That's a story bones. You may include a different detail than I do, or more, but not much more. Really, it is just the simple things. And if you're remembering some of our past lessons, this may sound similar to the storyboard. And in truth, it is. You could take these story bones and put them into a storyboard. Here's scene 1. The wife leaves her village. You could have her walking away from her village, hand in hand with her new husband. And then you could have her meeting the boy. And then you could have the boy turning away from her. You're not my mother. You could then have her going to the village wise man. And there you see him. You could then, and stick figures are fine, don't forget, stick figures are good. And then you could have her wrapping the meat. Put it in her pack, one or the other, both. And then walking to the lion. You see the lion on the rock, here she is. And you could do it where you see her getting closer and closer each day. And then you could show where she's cutting the whiskers, presenting them to the wise man, and him telling her, go home. And that's essentially the story. Story bones, storyboard. 2 fabulous tools for you as you learn your stories. All right. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, summer reading has started. And reading about stories, reading. The more you read, find books like this. Read those stories. These count towards your summer reading project. You can sign up online at Beanstack. You can go to the Kansas City Library's site, kclibrary.org, O-R-G, and look for the summer reading. It'll be really fun. It's called Live the Fantastic this year. So you can live the fantastic by creating stories, which you have to read to learn. Or maybe you'll watch them. I'll look for one online as well. So don't forget, when you sign up, you get to pick out a book to take home with you, your very own book that you get to keep. And that's a great one to read. Read that. Read 4 others. Once you've read 5 books, you can come back to the library. We're doing pickup right now, so you can text us and let us know you're coming. You can, or call, and then we'll have a book for you. Once you've read 5, then you get a really cool cup. We have ones that light up. They're awesome. All right, so that's it for today. come back to tomorrow, Wednesdays, and learn to draw your own comics, which are really excellent, as I keep saying, for learning your stories. It's like a really cool storyboard. And then on Thursdays, we have the Make Do Tell STEAM sessions, art and science projects from around your house, with using stuff from around your house. Plus, we're in the process of pulling together kits that will go along with some of those and some of our other things. It's going to be awesome this summer, despite the fact that we don't get to see you in person like we usually do. All right, Kansas City Public Library thanks you for joining us and for reading things that you love, things that light up your life and that are fantastic. All right, catch you next week. Bye now.